What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Nickel City Rush Hour. And man, I'm excited about this one, Jake. I need a little bit of a break from free agency draft talk. I mean, everything seems to be like the same every week. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, you do a mock draft yesterday, you do one today, talking about the same things. Needed a little bit of a break. And I said, you know what? Let's go back to 1983 and take a look at what I consider the best quarterback class ever. So it's going to be a lot of fun because there's some good stories in that first round, and we're just going to be talking about the quarterbacks taken in the first round because those are, there are three Hall of Famers that came out of that, and there are some head scratchers. You're like, what? Why did they take this person over this person? We're going to get into all that. 1983. I know you weren't even born yet
Not even a
then.
thought.
And I
Not even a
know
thought.
Big L's probably told you many good stories. And of course, you're just an encyclopedia of football. It doesn't matter what era, what year, you've went back and did plenty of research on these players that we're going to talk about today. And I know
Mhm.
you have your opinion as well on those. So
Yep.
yes, John Elway, the talk of the town, um, went to Stanford, had a great college career in Stanford. He was overwhelmingly the first pick that was going to be taken off the board. In 1982, though, his dad was like, you shouldn't go there. You shouldn't play for Baltimore. And he said the coach he used as a harsh taskmaster is what his dad said about the coach Frank Cush at the time.
Yeah.
And so in 1982, prior to the draft, Elway told him, "Don't draft me. Don't draft me." Yet
Right.
they went ahead, they drafted him. And the thing that Elway had going for him, Jake, and I don't know if you know this, but he was signed by the New York Yankees in the
Mhm.
second round of the 1981 draft, I believe. And he was an outfielder. He did extremely well hitting the ball in college. And yeah, I mean, he actually played, I think he played for the minors
Farm
for them
system.
for one
Yep.
year, and he actually hit like 318, four home runs. Was a very, very good baseball player. So he had that in his back pocket. And he says, "Hey, if you guys are gonna, trade me, I'm gonna move on to baseball." And
Yeah.
so he really held, he kind of had Baltimore, by the, what. And it would have been interesting if Baltimore would have held him to that and maybe tested him and say, okay, let's see if you're really going to do that. But they didn't. They traded him to Denver. But yeah, it was pretty crazy what he did. And then of course Eli Manning did it years later as well, saying, "I'm not going to play for that team." But what's cool is, like you said, he was in five Super Bowls. He lost his first three. By the way, he was in six AFC championship games. And guess which is the only one he lost? To the Buffalo Bills.
Buffalo Bills. Yep. Yep.
Buffalo Bills. And that was you want to talk about, it was a defensive battle. It was 10-7 in that game, which is just mind blowing when you consider those two quarterbacks, right? I do know that it was a cold day. I remember it, right? Pretty cool stuff there. But yeah, can you imagine just like being, and it wasn't Baltimore when I first was researching it. I'm like, that's right. Forgot. You almost forget about the Baltimore Colts. Johnny
Yeah.
Unitas. Um, Where's another guy? What was his name? Bert. The
Burt Jones.
quarterback. Bert
Burt
Jones.
Jones. Yep.
Bert Jones, right? I was thinking about him earlier. That guy had a
Yeah.
cannon.
Yep.
Johnny Unitas, of course. And here he is. He's like, nah, I'm not going to play. You need to trade me. So, what's your thoughts, man? Pretty bold move, but it worked out for him, right?
Yeah. It really did. He came to Denver. He succeeded Craig Morton there in Denver. Another pretty solid quarterback. He was there for many years. And yeah, he was basically like the comeback kid. You always knew if he was given the ball it didn't matter how much time was left in the game. If they were down, he was given the ball and gave him any bit of time. You knew he was going to come back, and famous for the drive back in 1987 against the Cleveland Browns, tears their hearts apart. Um, there were just so many great moments with him. The helicopter in the Super Bowl at like age 37 or 38 against the Packers. Uh, yeah, I mean, he is one of the. I think I have him at like number 6 or 7 all time on my quarterbacks list. I have a couple other guys ahead of him, but yeah, I mean, you can't talk about NFL history without John Elway, right? And now he's, sitting in the front office with the Denver Broncos right now. And he has a Super Bowl as a personnel guy, too, as the GM there with Peyton Manning as his guy. So
I'm
interesting.
interested in hearing who those other ones are ahead of him.
I think you got to go 1, Tom Brady.
Mhm.
2, I struggle because I really want to put I like obviously you have to mention Joe Montana, but do you put Montana or do you put Peyton Manning there? Because I feel like fundamentally there's no better quarterback in NFL history than Peyton Manning. Like fundamental wise, I'm not saying arm talent or anything like that. I think he is as good as it gets. But obviously, you have to put Tom at 1. He has the most Super Bowls. He has the statistics. There's no one topping that. So Tom is number 1. He's my solidified number 1. But number 2, it's tough for me. It's between Peyton and Joe Montana. But both of those guys, you can call them 2 and 3, right? Number 4, I think I'd have to put Aaron Rodgers, honestly. I just
Really?
feel it. I know. It might
Why?
be I've never seen anyone with that arm talent in the league. I mean, maybe our guy right now has it, but I've never seen anyone to be able to throw the football 60 yards across his body and put it pinpoint on a dime to a receiver. It's just incredible what he has done throughout his career. He has
You
a
know,
ring.
John Elway. John Elway had one of the strongest
I
arms
know. I
ever,
know.
ever. He
I
could
know.
probably throw the ball as long as Josh.
And it's tough. It's really hard to compare eras too, because obviously A-Rod plays in a more of a passing era. John Elway is fantastic, but I think number 5, I'd have to put another guy in that draft class, and you're not going to like this, Dan Marino.
Hmm?
Pure, prolific passer, and I'd put number 6 is probably John Elway. Or you got to talk about Drew Brees as well in the mix there, just because of what he did statistically. So yeah, he's probably 6 or 7 for me.
I wish Keith was here, and hopefully he checks this out on the rewatch because I'm going to have some good things to say about
Oh yeah,
Mr. Marino. But I mean, to me, he's won. He went to 5 Super Bowls. He's won 2. That alone puts him ahead of, in my opinion, Dan Marino, Jim
hmm
Kelly, and he threw for over 51,000 yards in his career.
yeah.
Went to 6 AFC championship games, won 5 of those. It's pretty damn good. Only the Buffalo Bills kept him from going to 6 Super Bowls, and who knows what would happen then. Um, and again, Dan Marino, who threw for 61,000, 10,000 yards more. Dan Marino played till 1999, and Elway played to 98. And Elway had some, I mean, I don't say wheels, but he was mobile.
Oh yeah,
He was mobile, and he had just 777 attempts. He ran for over 3,400 yards in his career, 33 touchdowns. Get, check this out. He actually caught 3 passes for
I love it.
61 yards and had a touchdown.
Yeah.
So that alone to me puts him ahead of some of the other gentlemen that you mentioned.
What about
Yeah,
Brett Favre? Where do you put Brett Favre on your list too?
I don't know. I'd have to put the
Top
whole
10?
list together. He's top.
Yeah, because
Mm,
there's a lot of names that just start coming
there
to
really,
mind.
there really
It's
is.
tough.
Yeah,
And then you
yeah.
got guys like Johnny Unitas and Fran Tarkenton, guys that played earlier on too. It's really hard to compare eras, but you look at what some of these dudes did during their era, like it really stands out to me. Like Dan Marino throwing for 5,084 yards in 1984, that was unheard of. And I know, like, obviously you throw the ball a million times, that's what your offense is. Like, to me, like, he kind of started a new trend in the NFL or where it became more of a passing offense. And, obviously credit to Dan Coryell as well. Eric Coryell offense with Dan Fouts. Obviously, I talk about that too. Dan Coryell, Dan Fouts, Don Coryell, Eric
Yeah,
Coryell offense.
Eric Coryell.
Yep.
Yeah, so that game against Buffalo in the AFC Championship, I mean, Denver kind of had their way. I mean, it was Carlton Bailey in the 3rd quarter who had a pick 6, 11-yard interception, gives the Bills a 7-0 lead.
Yep.
Scott Norwood with a key 44-yard field goal in the 4th, extended the lead to 10-0, and then the Broncos started marching back. And believe it or not, Broncos Gary Kubiak had a 3-yard rush to make it a 10-7 game. So I'm not sure. I can't remember why, because Elway played in that game. I think he might have gotten dinged up because Kubiak did come in for 12. He threw the ball for 12 attempts. And let's see here. He threw for 136. So, but Elway, check these stats. So Elway threw for um, he threw 11 completions on 21 attempts for 21 yards. He had one interception, was sacked 3 times. That Bills defense getting to him. Kubiak threw for 11 completions on 12 attempts for 136, no touchdowns, and he was sacked 1 time. Listen to Kelly stats. Kelly had a rough day, dude. 13 of 25 for 117 yards, 2 interceptions, 1 sack, 0 touchdowns. As you saw, Carlton Bailey, linebacker, was the only one who scored that day for the Buffalo Bills. And that I mean, think about that. That's what that
That's
Buffalo
crazy.
Bills team, that high scoring team. And again, it was a rough weather day. So pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, I mean, Elway, fantastic. I mean, a lot of people forget that he lost the first 3. He lost the first 3, right? And then it was like you said, I was thinking it was 8 or 9 years later from his last loss. And he was starting to kind of think maybe this isn't going to happen again. And towards the end of his career, he finally goes back to back and, sails off into the sunset on a beautiful win there, sort of like Peyton did. But
That was
go
what?
ahead.
So that was 1991, right? The 1991 season. I'm thinking of,
Yeah,
right?
against the Bills.
Yes,
Yeah. So the game was in
91. Yeah,
92, but it was the 91 season. Yep.
91 season. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So he could have gotten revenge against the Redskins then too. We prevented him from doing that. So that's cool. And I love the matchup, obviously, between Jim and him. But more of a defensive day.
Yeah.
That day, 10-7.
And imagine
Crazy.
this. So imagine Bills Mafia. Let's just say this happened to him. Imagine the Buffalo Bills draft John Elway with the first overall draft pick, and he doesn't want to play. And we're going to talk about Kelly because there's a fun story about him. I posted that in the Discord. But imagine, and then Elway gets traded to Denver, and guess what? Elway has to go and play Baltimore in his rookie season. You want to talk about a bunch of boo? Can you imagine going to the team that you said I will not play for, and you know how fired up that team's going to be? He said they were blitzing him all day, and why wouldn't they? He's a rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
Right. So, incredible stuff there. But it worked out for him, honestly.
Yep.
Let's go down the board here. So let's talk about this. Chad, you're going to like this. You probably know. Todd Blackledge taken with the 7th overall pick in the first round. Right. And, Blackledge, let's see here. So Blackledge played college in Penn State. Actually had a pretty decent career with Penn State, Jake. He threw for 41 touchdowns in 3 years with them. He had 22 touchdowns in his final season with Penn State in 1982. His quarterback rating was 134, not bad. He did throw 14 interceptions. He threw for 2,218 yards. Good stuff there. So I can see why the interest would be there. Because I'm going to tell you something. When you go to Jim Kelly's collegiate career, you got to be looking at it and like,
Nothing to write home about.
What made him? So how did he get so high on people's radar?
Yeah.
But anyhow, Todd Blackledge was one of the quarterbacks. Was kind of like a head scratcher because you got Kelly, you got Dan Marino, who was the last quarterback taken in the first round, right? Dan Marino. We're going to talk about Dan as well. So Dan Marino's thinking, what the hell? Todd Blackledge taking over me? And then he sees guys like Kelly. He didn't have a problem with Kelly so much, but Tony Eason and Ken O'Brien, we're going to get to those guys as well. But yeah, real head scratcher.
So Todd Blackledge, to give you a comparison to a more modern day quarterback, I would say he's like the old school version of Matt Leinart, how he was like super hyped up, gets drafted within the top 10. He starts some games, but doesn't just doesn't really pan out. Like, I don't even think he actually started a full season for the Chiefs when he was there. He may have started 8 games or so, like in a few seasons in a row. But other than that, he didn't do a whole lot. Statistically, you look at it, I think he threw more interceptions than touchdowns too. It just, So my closest comparison, like I said, would be like Matt Leinart. If you're talking about a more modern day guy, just came off the top of my mind. Like very overhyped, really successful college career, you think it's a shoo-in to be like your franchise quarterback, and that's what happens, And it's crazy because you look at the other guys taking around him, and it's like, oh my gosh, like how do we blow that one,
I mean, he only had 29 starts over
Oh wow,
his
yeah.
from 83 to
Finished his
89.
career with the Steelers, right?
Yep. Ended his
Steelers,
career
yeah.
with the Steelers. He had a let me just say this here. His quarterback rating in 83 was his best. But again, that's just basically based on 34 attempts, 20 completions. That's it.
Yeah, I was gonna say he didn't start his
He
rookie
didn't
year,
even
right?
start a game, right? No
Yeah.
starts in 83. Um, his best
Was
quarterback
it Bill
rating
Kenny? Bill Kenny, I
after
think,
that,
right? Was the quarterback
yes,
in '83?
yeah. So
He was good.
his next best quarterback rating, Jake, was in 1986. He had 8 starts. He was 5-3, and he had a 67.6 quarterback rating.
Wow.
So, Chad, you want to
Well,
talk about a big swing and a miss there? And
yeah.
it's crazy. We're going to talk about it, but the reason why Dan Marino and people were overlooking him was because there were thoughts that he was into drugs. There were thoughts that his whole team in college, his final year, because going into the year of Dan Marino's, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I might as well bring it up here. And Dan Marino's final year at Pitt, they went into the preseason, I think, as the favorites to win the national championship. Dan had an amazing in 1981. Dude, he threw for 34 touchdowns.
Yeah.
34 touchdowns. He threw for 2,600 yards. And going into 82, they were the preseason favorites. Now they had a down year. He only threw for 17 touchdowns, 22 interceptions, but he had thrown 21 interceptions the year before. But the year before, Jake, let me go through Dan Marino's quarterback rating. In 79, 133. In 80, 121. In 81, 144. That was his best year in college. And then in 82, 118. And the only reason he slipped is because there started to be rumors that he was doing coke, that the team was doing coke. And it's unfortunate. It was probably just by association, guilt by association from the other teammates that might have been doing that.
Yeah.
There's no real proof that that happened, but believe it or not, that's what caused them to drop down the board in the first round. And a lot of teams, Kansas City, regretting that pick, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, poor Chad, man. That's tough. You got 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in this draft class, and you had a chance to potentially get 2 of them, and you end up with Todd Blackledge, who was supposed to be a shoo-in. Like, that guy was supposed to be great. It was the second best alternative to John Elway, and man, it didn't pan out. So
let's move on to the next quarterback here. So our guy Jim Kelly. Jim Kelly made it clear. Well, if you listen to the video, he actually put a video out, and he admits to this. After Elway was drafted, and Elway said he didn't want to play for them. Kelly's agent looks at him and is like, Jim, are there any places you don't want to play? And Jim says, yeah, I played in University of Miami, Florida, and I don't want to play for Minnesota. Back then, Minnesota did not have the dome. I
no, they
believe
did
that's
not.
why he said that.
Yeah.
He said, I do not want to play for Green Bay, and certainly I want to play for the Buffalo Bills. So
I love it.
He tells the story that he's with his mom and dad right there in the living room, listening to they're watching the draft. And the 12th pick, Buffalo Bills come up, and he's all like, please don't let them draft me. Please don't let them draft me. And Roselle comes up and announces, with the 12th overall pick, the Buffalo Bills take tight end Tony Hunter. And Kelly says he was so excited, he knocked his mom off the couch. He said he had to apologize, and I'm so sorry, Mom, for knocking her off the couch. And he's like, yes, I'm not going to Buffalo. Yep. But his agent turns to him and says, slow your roll, Jim. The Bills have the 14th pick as well. And so the 13th pick comes along, and Detroit takes James Jones, fullback.
Love that.
And then with the 14th pick overall, Pete Rozelle comes up and says, the Buffalo Bills take Jim Kelly. And he said, I had tears in my eyes. I wasn't literally crying, but I had some tears in my eyes. And then, you know how they called him up. I forget what it was, some news station or something. They're like, they get him on the phone, and and Jim's saying all the good stuff that you want to hear. Oh, I kind of knew it was going to be Buffalo, because they're asking him how's he feel about it. And I want to
Yeah.
thank the Buffalo Bills. And then in his video, he says, you got to say those things. You got to say those things, right? And the story gets even better. So he's in the stadium about to sign the contract, right? He's about to sign the contract with the Bills. And a GM for the Chicago Blitz from the
Bruce Allen.
USFL
Yep.
somehow gets a hold of a secretary. And I don't even know. So I'm like, okay, there's a big gap for me. How the hell did he know he was at the stadium about to sign, first
Yeah.
of all? And so he calls and gets a hold of a secretary. And he says, I need you to get Jim Kelly's agent on the call. It's an emergency. And so I don't know if it was a he or she, whoever the secretary is, they actually go in where the meeting was happening and say, you need to come out and take this call. And, I think the agent steps out and basically says, you need to not sign that. We're going to pay Jim more money than he'll get, or it'll force the hand of the NFL, and we're going to give him a chance to play wherever he wants to play. And so when he left, I forget who was on the video, but he says, I knew we had lost him at that moment. So can you imagine who the hell was this secretary
I
that
know,
went
right?
in there? Right?
We got to do some research on that.
We got to do some research.
Curious.
But my goodness, we could have had Jim for 83 and 84.
Yeah.
And my goodness, so get him started earlier. Here's the question: if Kelly hand come to Buffalo in 83, what number would he have worn? Because Joe Ferguson was with the Bills to 1984. And that is very interesting. That was my guy, Ferguson. So don't know. He probably would have would have held out. I'm not coming to Buffalo unless
he wouldn't have came to Buffalo, period. He would have had a Dan Marino moment, right?
So almost
or a John Elway moment, rather.
Almost like a John Elway moment where he basically has put it out there. And there were a couple other interviews. So after he went to the USFL, of course, he was the MVP in 1984, had a fantastic season with them, got paid lots of money. And he was asked, do you have any regrets? And I think he said something to the effect of, no. Would you rather be playing in Buffalo? I'll end it there, right? So, so it's crazy because most people, you would think, if this guy ever comes to Rich Stadium and plays in a game not for the Bills, he's going to get booed, just like Elway did when he went to Baltimore. But here we are, the USFL folds, and after he had come off a great year with the USFL, and he has to come to Buffalo, and now you're wondering, what's the fan reaction going to be? This guy's put it out there, man. He wanted nothing to do with Buffalo, Jake. Nothing. Yeah. But I can only recall what I heard on TV and radio, but there was a parade for him when he came in. He was welcomed. And, when he took the field for the first time, as far as I recall, there was no booing whatsoever. I know for myself, I was at that time living in California. I went back and forth from Buffalo to California a few times. But when I was out in Cali, he actually was when he joined. And that's where I think I had heard the stories where they were lined up celebrating him. They had a parade for the guy. And for me personally, I was bummed. I wasn't kind of bummed in 83. I didn't know much about him. Let me just give you some stats from Jim Kelly. If you were to look at his collegiate stats.
Yeah, it wasn't anything to write home about, right? He had like one 2,000-yard season. I looked at it not too long ago.
Yeah. So he got hurt in his
year, he was hurt.
Yeah, right? He got hurt. Hurt his shoulder. He only threw 81 passes, completed 51. His quarterback rating was 133. And he threw 3 touchdowns in his senior year. He only threw 14 touchdowns in 81, 11 in 80, and 5. So his total touchdowns for 4 years, and again, they weren't full 4 years, was 33. He threw a lot of interceptions. Which
I was going to say, it was almost 1-to-1, right?
28 interceptions, 33 touchdowns. Crazy. And the knock on him coming out of college was similar to what Josh was. Like, it's not very accurate, and that's true. It was very true. Yeah. And again, it's very similar to Josh in that threw a lot of interceptions, even when he became professional. And even when you looked at his UFL numbers, they were freaking unbelievable.
Oh
But he
yeah.
threw quite a few picks as
Yep.
well, right?
Yes, he did. He was a gunslinger. I mean, I guess it's ingrained in Buffalo Bills quarterbacks, right? Just throw a
Yeah,
lot of interceptions,
yeah.
get back at it, go back on the field like a goldfish. Short-term memory.
So again, when he left, I didn't think much of it because again, I wasn't watching draft. I wasn't watching, what the experts were saying. Um, but when you look back now, you're like, what was the big hype about him, right?
Yeah,
What was
right.
hype? Now I will say this. I mean, he was like a linebacker in a quarterback's body. Dude was incredible as far as a big physical dude for a quarterback at that time.
Yeah.
And so when he came back, I had started hearing more stuff. I started learning more things. And I'm like, was excited when I finally heard Jim Kelly will be joining the Buffalo Bills. And he came out of the gates, and I still remember, it was either a Jets game or whatever, but put up big numbers. I don't know if he got a win his first game, but it was pretty darn close. And then it was game on. Jim Kelly was the greatest quarterback for the Buffalo Bills and still is, Jake. Still is. Until Josh can get us to some Super Bowls. And Josh will pass his numbers. But until you get, unless Josh gets to a Super Bowl, I don't care if it's just one. If he wins it, okay, Josh will be the guy that I think, you could say is the best quarterback of all time.
So I'm going to pause you right there.
Yep.
Who do you think? So who does or did more for their team? Does Josh Allen do more for the Buffalo Bills right now? Or did Jim Kelly do more for the Buffalo Bills back then? Because I think supporting cast wise, Josh has a much worse supporting cast than Jim Kelly had. And that's no knock against Jim Kelly. He's obviously great. But when you have the all-time leading sack leader in NFL history, right? You got a Hall of Fame receiver, a Hall of Fame running back. Josh, I mean, maybe Steph, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, but great receiver. He's had some good players. I'm not going to say he's had Hall of Fame players.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I mean, yes, the Buffalo Bills, that team was stacked, and that's why I'm changing my opinion. You're going to hear me change my opinion on Dan Marino.
Yeah.
Honestly, Jim Kelly's my favorite all-time quarterback, but if I'm being realistic, we'll talk about Dan in a little bit. But I can't put him over Dan, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. And he is my favorite all time. And again, for me, you're right, Jake. As far as teams go, he had a better supporting cast by far.
And again, that's no knock
over
against
Jake.
him.
No,
because he did a lot for this team too. I mean, he was as tough and gutsy as it gets.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's a dude that you will rally around just because you know how damn tough he is. And it's going to take everything out of that opposing team to keep him out of playing,
Yep.
And it did happen from time to time. But, yeah, those guys love playing for him.
And, Josh, like I said, gets the one and wins one, I'll put him over it. But if he gets the none, I'm not going to use the excuse that it was the team because I just don't think it's fair. This team's good. The Buffalo Bills, I mean, maybe you say the talent's not as good, but they're expected to win the Super Bowl in the last 3 years.
Yeah,
And did it.
That's true.
So, it's got to have some good talent to be able to say that, right?
That's
and
true.
Good stuff about Jimbo. I mean, honestly, the story has a good ending to the story, right? He loves Buffalo. Buffalo loves him. Went through that heartbreak with his son, which Buffalo really rallied with him. But yeah, I mean, Kelly now is just a diehard Buffalo Bill forever. So again, real quick, Elway, like I said, he threw for over 51,000 yards. Blackledge, who was taken the second quarterback, 7th overall, he threw for 5,200 yards. Jim Kelly threw for over 35, almost 35,500 yards in his career. Next, with the 15 pick overall, the New England Patriots take Tony Eason.
Love it.
And so Tony Eason in college played for Illinois 2 years, 81 and 82. Had some pretty good numbers. Put together a 20 touchdown season and a 17 touchdown season. Quarterback ratings of 140 in his rookie year, and in 82 is 128. So he comes out of Illinois. Again, people are thinking, why is Dan Marino slipping? And we already kind of mentioned that, but Rumors were, and there were GMs that had admitted it, that they passed them up because they believed in those drug rumors.
Yeah.
Man, just incredible. But Eason, let's see here. Let's take a look at his stats. Again, he started in his career. Let me go over to him real quick. Hold on one sec. In his career, Eason started 51 games. Had a long career from 83 to 90. In 1989, he played for two different teams. Played for New England, and then he left New England to go to the Jets. So he played for the Patriots from 83 to 88. And in 87 and 88, he only started 3 games in 87, 2 games in 88. But he was the starter in 84, 85, and 86. He had a record of 10-4 in 1986, which was pretty darn good. And he threw for, let me see here, threw for over 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns. What was his quarterback rating that year? Quarterback rating was 89.2. Nothing great. But yeah, so had a okay. I mean, he played long years. I mean, 7 years at least. But yeah, so that was an interesting one as well. Like Tony Eason coming out of Illinois, 2 years played there. And again, Jake, you know the colleges better than me. I don't know if they were considered Division I or Division II. You know,
What's that? Illinois? Oh, they're
yeah.
Division I.
Okay,
Big Ten.
so
Yep.
there you go.
Yep.
So, what'd you think of that pick?
Solid. I mean, he was a Super Bowl quarterback. Him and Steve Grogan, I know they alternated a little bit, but I think
Yeah.
85 it was him and Steve Grogan, right? They were the two quarterbacks there. So I know in 86, that was probably his best year. I think he even had MVP vote. And then he kind of fell off a little bit, but I know like he had guys like Stanley Morgan, who was a fantastic receiver. Mosi Tutupu, I got to give love to the fullbacks. Also, Mosi Tutupu, famous Simpsons character. He was on the one episode with the Simpsons. I don't know if you remember that one, Mike.
No.
But his prime was definitely that 85, 86, those 2 seasons right there. And 87, Chad, was the strike year. He was asking if 86 was a strike year. 1987 was the strike year.
So in 85, when they had that really good record, 86 at 10-4.
Mm-hmm.
I think the year before in 85, so the
Super Bowl year.
The Bears, they went to the Super Bowl. So that had to be Grogan starting because in 85, although he was 6-4, he started 10 games. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was Grogan instead of Eason.
Yeah, I think
can't remember.
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah. So that was that.
Yeah, it was Steve Grogan. Yeah.
Amazing Chicago Bear 46 defense that should have went undefeated. And there was only one quarterback that ruined it for him. That was Dan Marino.
Crazy.
So yeah, that game was I think it was a Monday night game, and it was Dan Marino was just incredible in that game. But yeah, so Tony Eason taken there.
Yeah. And how about this? I want to bring up this comment real quick. Trek reviewer, here's a big what if. What if the Bills had taken Darryl Green instead of Tony Hunter? Then in 85, they could have taken Jerry Rice instead of Derek Burrows and still have gotten Andre Reed. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge what if, but man.
Yeah. Darryl Green was taken at the last pick in the first round.
Maybe the fastest man to ever play, Darryl Green, by the way. He claimed that he ran like a 4.0 40. Now, this is back before laser times and all that stuff, but this dude was still fast right up until his last days playing in 02. Like at the age of 40-something, he could still run like a 4.3. So I kind of believe it. This dude was incredible.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next quarterback because this is the biggest head scratcher here. And Dan Marino is still like, Tony Eason? Seriously? And Marino's getting frustrated if you watch the video on him because I love that they have all these films now. They talk to the guys after their careers and they go through it and tell you what they're thinking because your favorite quarterback taken by the New York Jets with the 24th overall pick, Ken O'Brien. Yeah. And dude, you know how you can go get college stats for most of these guys?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been able to find his college stats, but I will tell you who he actually.
So he went to what? UC Davis or Sacramento State? Or
like so he went to Sacramento State, and he played at the University of California, and Division II. And in his senior year, he was an NCAA Division II All-American. He led UCD to a 10-0
UC
regular
Davis. Yep.
season mark and Division II championship. And so they draft him. And I'll tell you what,
Nice career.
after his first year, he was an All-Pro in 85, 11-5. So whoever did the scouting report there, I'm clapping for that person
Yeah.
because who the hell would have drafted this guy with his college, pedigree, right? It wasn't
Yep.
much other than a 10-0 at a Division II. Who cares? Like, who was that
I gotta look
scout?
this up. I want to see. He's got to be like either 2 or 3 for Jets all-time leading passers, right? I mean, he's probably not far. Yeah, he's number 2, right
He,
behind Joe Namath.
he played to 92. He had 2 All-Pro seasons. I mean, he started for them 110 games. Let's see, what did he throw? Threw for over 25,000 yards, 128 touchdowns. His overall quarterback rating was 80.4. But he had, like, even in, his last year, he only started 4 games. His last good season was after the 11-5. It just went downhill pretty much. Then he had an 8-8 season in 1991, which he was an All-Pro during that year.
Yep.
So again, kudos to whoever the scouting team was, but still, you have Dan Marino. Dan Marino is taken with the 27th overall pick. The Miami Dolphins take Dan Marino. And let me just say this too about the Kelly pick. Again, I don't know who was in the video. I don't know who he was. He was part of the coaching staff, but they had their eyes on Kelly and they had their eyes on Marino. That's the 2 guys that were on their radar. And so if by chance, Detroit had taken Jim Kelly, Dan Marino would have been a Buffalo Bill. So interesting stuff right there.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, Dan Marino taking the 27th overall pick. And honestly, 40, what he threw for, I said 61,000 yards. He played until 1999, played 1 more year than Elway did. And there was in my opinion, there was no better release than this man. No better release. This quick release on Dan Marino was incredible. He wasn't really fleet of foot, right? But man, could he get rid of the ball quickly, kind of Joe Burrow-ish. But he didn't need a 2-step drop. He dropped down. He had enough where he can maneuver, kind of like Big Ben, maybe slide out of the way. He also had some good offensive lines pass protecting for him. But dude was just incredible. And to put up those number of yards. And again, I will admit to you, I was, again, it's hard for me to say anyone's better than Jim Kelly. But Jim Kelly did have the better team around him. Marino did not. Jim Kelly just had a complete team. And you never know. I mean, Jim Kelly, we saw what he did in the USFL when he was just a passing machine. And we saw what he did with the K gun. But Dan Marino, to me, was definitely. And Keith, listen, he's a better quarterback than Jim Kelly.
Wow.
But how about that? Last quarterback taken in the first round.
Look at how fast Mike moved right to the next point there.
No. I'm staying on Dan Marino. I'm staying on him. Last quarterback.
No, I'm just saying right after he's saying that.
Yeah.
I'm like, look
we got to move on. We got to move
right
on.
to it. He's like, all right, you heard it. I'm done.
The last time you'll hear me say it.
I love it.
But no, he was incredible. I mean, he was that guy. He was that team that kept the Bears from going undefeated. That Bear team, nobody had any business beating them. They really didn't. And there was a lucky bounce in that game, in that Bears game, where it was deflected high off of a defensive lineman, knocked it high up in the air, and it went into the Mark brothers' hands and went in for a touchdown. But Dan had I think he threw for like 270 yards that game against that defense. I think he threw for maybe 3 touchdowns in that game. And they beat the 85 Bears, the only team to be able to say that. That's an accomplishment in itself. But Dan Marino, let's talk about him a little bit. So let me go to his college stats because they are the most impressive. Why people were passing on him, I have no clue. He threw 34 touchdowns for Pitt in 1981, 34 with a rating of 144. And as I said, going into the preseason in his senior year, they were favorites to win the national championship.
Yeah.
And this is the year when he throws 22. He throws 22 interceptions, more interceptions than touchdowns. He only threw 17. I don't think the team had anywhere near what they expected to as far as wins and losses that year. And then those rumors come out. Those rumors that he's cocaine, whatever else. And whether it was true or not, I mean, he claims it wasn't. And that kept him from being taken near the top of the board. In my opinion, he should have been Elway and Marino.
Yep.
And I think the only reason like all those GMs passed him up is because of those rumors. Is that incredible?
Yeah, it was just
what?
very like back then. If you heard anything about foul play, like it would derail you in the draft. He's lucky he was still a first rounder because of that. Like even if it was just rumors back then, right? So yeah, it's crazy that he slipped to 27, but the Dolphins, man, that was a smart freaking move by them. That's all I got to say.
Don Shula said they did not expect Marino to drop that far. They had other plans, but as it started getting closer to him, Shula started calling. I think he was calling Marino's coach at Pitt and just making sure. Are you sure? Like he was also worried. There was concern even at 27 that these drug allegations were true. And so it was just crazy. Shula was like, "Oh my God, is he really going to drop to us? Is he going to drop to us?"
Right.
And damn, he dropped to him, and they didn't hesitate, and they took him. But Shula was nervous. He was making a lot of calls, checking with, all the references about this guy, and they make the pick. And then of course, Dan Marino goes to his second year, goes to the Super Bowl, and gets beat by I think it was San Francisco.
Montana.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, Montana.
Yep.
They did some fun commercials afterwards.
Yeah.
But after seeing him, what he did in that year, there was no doubt that he would be back many more times. And it's just a crime that he never was. They never were able to put the team around him to get him back again. And it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, it is. Especially with, like, he would literally just take over games himself, like, just slinging the ball anywhere. Anywhere he put it, he put it, and it was just magic, man. I didn't get to watch him play a whole lot, unfortunately, but just going back and watching some of those old games, the dude was a legend.
He was
and just such a pure passer, like looked the part.
Strong. I mean, his arm. It was so quick. Yet he had a strong arm. He was throwing the ball well before people were cutting into the routes. He just knew where they were going to be, and it was a thing of beauty, man. And again, when you look at all these quarterbacks, so first of all, let me just rattle off the Hall of Famers in that draft. That first round: Elway, Hall of Famer; Eric Dickerson, Hall of Famer; Jimbo Covert, tackle,
Chicago Bears.
Yep, Hall of Famer; Bruce Matthews, guard for Houston, Hall of Famer;
guard, center, tackle, you name it. Bruce Matthews played everything.
Jim Kelly, Hall of Famer; Dan Marino, Hall of Famer; Dale Green, Hall of Famer, and Dale Green was taken with the last pick there. So great year, arguably, in my opinion, the greatest. And you can say, well, why is it the greatest, Mike? Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. Elway got to 5 Super Bowls. Kelly got to 4. That's 9. Marino got the 1. That's 10. That only matches what the GOAT did. Tom Brady got to 10. And unfortunately, out of 10, we were 2-8 with these quarterbacks. And but I'm going to just say, because of the numbers they put up, because of what they did for football, because it was a crime that they just didn't have. If Dan Marino had the Buffalo Bills, and I know I was asked this question, they had the Bills team, would he have won a Super Bowl? The first one, yes.
Wow.
The next 3, we were just outmatched, man. I'll tell you, a lot of hearts were broken. Like even for Elway in his first 3, those NFC teams, Jake, were just so dominant back then. Like think of it like this right now. Buffalo Bills. We've been the number 2. You got the Kansas City Chiefs blocking us. There's always that other team. Back in the 90s, it was always the NFC. Those teams were just bullies, man. They were big. They were runners. They could run the ball. They were so physical, and the AFC just didn't stack up to them when they got into those games. It was crazy.
Yeah, credit Tom Brady for actually getting that AFC versus NFC Super Bowl record higher, or at least pretty even to what it is now. And obviously the Chiefs, Chad, your Chiefs, kind of helping that as well with the ratio. But yeah, I mean, there was a huge difference. I mean, most of the time the NFC team was going to win when it came to the Super Bowl. So just you look up until like a certain point, it finally started to shift in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, so trick review. I don't know if we answered this question. Marino did have
I
all the
was just going
records
to
at
answer
Pitt,
this. Yeah.
but
So
do you know who broke?
Kenny Pickett
Really?
broke all of his records at Pitt.
Wow.
Almost crazy. He is the all-time leading passer at Pitt.
So that, I mean, Jake, we only have a couple minutes. I want to keep it to an hour, but I mean, real quick, your 2004 comparison, rattle through them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first overall, very similar situation. Eli Manning taken by the Chargers, a team that he had repeatedly said, him, his family, Archie, everyone basically said, hey, we don't want the Chargers to take Eli. And they still took him. And then they wound up trading him for Phillip Rivers. And, somewhat of an even trade, just minus the Super Bowls. Eli ends up getting 2 Super Bowl wins against the New England Patriots. I think Bills fans were huge fans of Eli Manning when he beat the Patriots both those times.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, you had him, you had Phillip Rivers, you had Big Ben Roethlisberger, and then J.P. Lossman was the last of those guys in the first round in 04.
I know you loved Lossman. I know you thought he was the next coming of Dan Marino and Jim Kelly, right? You tell
Monster arm, just didn't have it up here.
Oh man.
Still kind of lasted long in the NFL though. I mean, he was drafted 22nd overall. And he played 8 years almost? Yeah, 8 seasons. So not bad. And there was a point, I know he mentioned like in 2016 that he can come back and play in the NFL if he needed to. And he talked to several NFL teams about making a comeback and being a backup quarterback, which is pretty wild to think. But yeah, I mean, pretty crazy. I think you had 3 Hall of Famers in that class as well. I know Eli Manning, it's heavily discussed on whether he's a Hall of Fame quarterback or not. To me, he is because of what he did in the playoffs. He has the numbers. He has 2 Super Bowl rings. And during the playoffs, those playoff runs, they don't win any of those Super Bowls without Eli Manning because he played at another level throughout those playoff series. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and look at who he beat in the Super Bowls.
I know.
Both of them were Brady, right?
Right. Yep. And I'm not saying it was all him, but there was a big difference with him at the quarterback.
He had some big numbers from passing yards in his career. It was he had some really good receivers, and they had a very good defense as well. But yeah, I agree with you. He's Hall of Famer in my opinion. But he was saying I was referring before Pickett is what Trek Reviewer was saying. So I'm like curious.
Let me think about this one. So Pitt. Ooh.
And while you're thinking about that, I do want to throw out another fact for Chad. Todd Blackledge until Mahomes. So Blackledge was the only quarterback taken in the first round by the Chiefs until Pat Mahomes. Interesting.
And Tony Hunter,
crazy?
Tony Hunter was the last tight end taken by the Bills in the first round before Dalton Kincaid.
Interesting. And Tony Hunter's his career ended shortly with I think it was some type of leg injury.
Quickly, Phillip Rivers. He's your numbers guy in this class. I think he's a Hall of Famer based just solely on that. This dude had a ton of 4,000-yard seasons, so many consecutive years where he threw for over 4,000 yards, 8-time Pro Bowler, and 11 kids. Are you kidding me? Put him in the Hall. I mean, he deserves it. He was a very good quarterback. He was an elite talent. He was top 5 several times throughout his career. So, to me, he is a Hall of Fame quarterback because of that. And then, of course, Big Ben Roethlisberger. Numbers, Super Bowls, guy just won games. So, he's like your John Elway of this class, essentially. So, to me, those 3 guys are Hall of Famers. And, yeah, got to love it.
You were asking me, Jake, to rate them, that quarterback class. And, again, it's going to be the top 3 I'll give you. It's a close one. I'm going to give Elway the edge because he got to that many Super Bowls, won 2 of them. It's going to be Dan Marino, Jim Kelly. That's it. Let's go. Let's go. So everybody, that's it. We're going to roll. I told my wife and I we're going to stay true to it. We'll see you this Sunday, and we'll probably be talking football again, current football. So again, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see y'all soon.
Go Bills.